All right, good evening, everybody. A few little technical glitches, but we are here. It's happy August already. Look at that, August 1st. Design and site selection group. There has been a lot that's been done since the last meeting. We'll waste no more time. If the Studio G can jump right into their presentation, we'll start going through the items that we're looking at for this evening.
All right, I would love to. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Steve.
Ah, my goodness. You good?
No, I still get the same error message.
So while we're waiting, I have somebody on the participant list from Foley and McCarty, PC. Who was that, please?
I think that's Stacy, right?
Stacy's that.
Oh, is that what maybe that's what I'm signed in on?
Yeah, that's you.
Potentially?
That's you.
Is that all right? Yeah.
Cool.
I
No,
have
thank
many,
you.
I wear many different hats, but I didn't realize that's the one I signed in on, so I apologize.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure everybody who's here, they can introduce themselves.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Okay, we are in business. So I think tonight is going to be short and sweet. I'm trying to move through this quickly. So not much to talk about tonight, but some important things. I'm going to skip the project goals because we discussed this last time and we are tweaking the second one a little bit, but as of now, it's a little bit more in the direction and we can make a final decision on that later. All right, so the fun part. We received cost estimates for 6 options that we looked at, a code upgrade option, 2 addition renovation options, and 3 new construction options, one of which is at the Wickham Field location. And these estimates included, they were based on MSBA guidelines, which is just the bare minimum that the MSBA recommends. This is, when we look at this needs to just be seen as a comparison between the options and not as a reflection of what the final cost is going to be. So this initial estimate is sort of trying to compare apples to apples, and just as it's useful for seeing, okay, this one's a little bit more, this one's a little bit less. It's not about, okay, this one's costing X amount of dollars and this one's costing Y amount of dollars. So with that in mind, they all came in, except for the code upgrade option, they came in very close to each other. When we look at the price per square foot, that's probably the most impactful number to use because that is not going to change regardless of how many square feet we have. And this number, they're all in the mid 800s. And to see consistent pricing like this across all of these different options is really interesting, but it's also sort of reassuring because it means that not any one of these options is going to be way more expensive or way less expensive than the others, with the exception of the code upgrade option. So in order to read this chart, basically we have this row has been highlighted because that's really the most important one to take away from this. This is the most reliable number on here because it is so preliminary. It's very difficult to have a cost estimate that is reasonably accurate, but the square footage, the price per square foot is a much more reliable indicator. The next thing to look at here is going to be the estimated total project cost. These are where the estimates came in. And again, if you look at them all, they're all the mid 70 millions, except for the code upgrade.
Really,
yes.
I apologize to interrupt. Steve Venuti, could you let Kelly back in, please?
Thank
you.
Okay.
See that?
All set. Okay. Thanks, Marie.
Sure. So you'll see on here that there's a CMR estimate and a GBB estimate. these two numbers, DBB is design, bid, build, and that's a very linear process of we design the building, we send the design out for bids, we receive the bids, we choose the least expensive, and then they build it. Pretty straightforward. It's a pretty traditional way to go about constructing a project. And you compare that to CMR, that stands for Construction Manager at Risk. And that the name's a little bit of a misnomer, but basically it means that you partner earlier on with a construction manager, and they are able to provide feedback and cost estimating as you go along to help guide your decision making so that you can save money. There is an increase in initial price for choosing the CMR rate over the design bid build, but there are pros and cons to both. We don't have to decide which one we're doing now, but you should be aware that there are two different ways that this project could go, and we'll be discussing that more in detail later. For the purposes of this part, we're looking at everything as design bid build, just to compare apples to apples. So you'll see estimated total project cost based on design bid build. So included in those prices is demolition and abatement. And even for the code upgrade option, that would be the abatement portion, like removing any asbestos or other hazardous materials that are found. Even though there's no demolition, there's still going to be a decent amount of removing material from the building, and that's where that money comes from. In the other option, this is purely demolition price, and you have to do special disposal if you find any hazardous material. So that's what those numbers indicate. And I will point out that for option 4.1, this cost is not reimbursable by the MSBA. So that has to get factored into the decision a little bit differently. Next thing to look at is we included a line item here for utility upgrades. We don't yet know what those are going to be, but we wanted to make people aware that this is another additional cost that's going to go into this. And then we included the possibility of modulars. The design of the ad reno has been thought through in such a way that we don't anticipate that you need any modulars. Basically, we build a new academic wing, move all the kids over there, then demolish the old academic wing, and it's done pretty nice and neatly without a lot of drama. So we don't anticipate modulars for those. But for the code upgrade option, you definitely would need to be shifting people in and out of rooms as you go through in phases and refinish parts of the building at a time. All right, this maximum MSBA eligible reimbursement number here. This is based on, it's a calculation that they have you do. They reimburse up to a certain square footage, a certain price per square foot, and then another calculation that they put into it. And so basically the important thing to take out of this is that for each one of these cost estimates that we got, the total project cost, this bottom row here represents what the Littleton district share would be. So it's a lot to absorb, and I hope this made sense. The key takeaway is really that there's no outliers here. These are all approximately within the same ballpark of each other. These differences are very small, especially at this early stage. And from what I've seen of this, the numbers that you previously went through when we did the evaluation and we voted online and we came up with these scores for each of these options, there's nothing that I see in these cost estimates that would alter those numbers. So I'd like to just answer any questions that you might have right now or any discussion, and it would be great to get consensus about whether or not we still feel the same way about how you previously scored all of these options.
Marilee, can you, I had a question. This is Ryan. So if I was looking at option 3.1, that's 77.7 million. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So I think we were thinking the reimbursement rate was somewhere to the tune of about 48% on this project. So I was trying to figure out how we went to the 52.4 million on that, because from my math, that should be more like around 40 million.
Right. So that is from they reimburse up to a certain dollar per square foot. And the MSBA is a little bit behind in their money. They're very slow to change. For many, many years, they were doing it around, I think, $250 a square foot. And that just did not reflect reality at all. And then I think it was sometime around 2017, 2019, something like that. They increased the number quite a bit. And then again, since then, they increased the number to $650 per square foot. Now, you're not really finding schools that are built for $650 a square foot, but that is how they do their calculation. It's 48% up to $650 a square foot, plus some other calculations. And that's why this number is higher than 48% of this number, if that makes sense.
It does, but I think for our planning purposes, that with the limitation of what MSBA is, I think at least for me, I was always working along the percentage basis. And I mean, that's a delta of, at least in terms of the town's obligation, that shifts about another $12 million onto the project.
Yep,
so
that is a good point. And I wonder if Mark or Suresh would like to chime in here a little bit about more of the logistics of this.
Yeah, Suresh has his hand up. He's probably anticipating that.
Oh, perfect.
To answer your question, Ryan, first of all, the numbers that we are calculated, the current number the MSBA gives is $605 per square foot, not $650, $605.
Sorry. Thank you.
The good news is, starting January 1st, when we go in front to the board for this project's approval, the number is going to go up to 600 and let me see, 645. It's going to go up to 645 from current 605. So they're increasing it by $40 per square foot. And that's what the proposal is to the board right now. It'll go in front of the board in October, the next meeting, which is August, or maybe might go into October, and that's when they will make the final decision. But to go back to your question, so what you do is, if you look at the board number, the dollar per square foot cost, which is pretty much consistent in the mid 800s. So MSBA is only paying $605 right now. This calculation is based upon 605 of the multiplied by the square footage of the building, which is 73,850. Multiply that with 0.48. That's the share, the MSBA share comes into place. Add 20% of the soft cost, and you add, again, multiply that by, that soft cost again is subject to a limit of 550 only. They're not increasing that limit that I know of right now. So that's also based upon, there will be some share coming more from you and less from the MSBA. So the MSBA is trying to do a level playing field, or trying to do more projects than that come in front of them. So that's the reason they limit the cost of per square foot, what they will allow you. So that's the reason, like I think I mentioned this very early on, when you say 0.48, think more like 0.4 to 0.35. I've always been that, proponent of that, because there's no way you will get the whole 48 cents. That's not going to happen. That's they bring it up at this eligible cost. Every time it says 48% of the eligible cost. And the eligible cost has a lot of parameters. Like in this particular case, we also have a lot of site work. So there's a 8% limit on the site work, or 10, that's the cost of the site work. Right now they're allowing us, for 10%, which is $59 a square foot. Okay. Which is the most they will allow as eligible. Beyond that, if you have site work costs or anything outside the building footprint or the site footprint, sorry, not building. Let's say we have to bring the utilities, a mile down the street extra. Anything that's happening off the property, that's not eligible for by MSBA standards. So there's a lot of factors that go into that place, and we try to, give you an. We don't want to give you a very rosy picture saying, and then come back and say, sorry, we made a mistake. So that's the reason we try to come up with the numbers the best we have based on the information we have right now.
And Suresh, going forward, can't that 48% change when you start adding points?
Yeah, it can, depending on a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah. I mean, right. It could go up to 50, 51, depending on green building, LEED certification. Like there's other things that add points to it, but it is minimal. Yeah.
So I just want to hope everybody's clear on this just going forward, that it's not the bottom line and then the district share is 48%. So does this make sense, Ryan? Did that kind of?
No, it does. Suresh did a nice job of explaining it, but it just, I think that, we all have to then sell this to town meeting, and I then have to sort of back off and say, well, it really wasn't 48%. It's more like, when you net everything out, probably closer to 40%. So it's just, I understand the rules as to why they are, and I appreciate it because now I better understand it. It's just, it becomes a harder thing to sell because I think that for us, we've depicted it so far that it's been a 48% reimbursement rate. But if there's a limitation on the per square footage amount, then that is what it is. But certainly not what I expected up into this meeting. So not anyone's fault. I just disappointed that this becomes more of an obligation for the taxpayer of Littleton. But be that as it may.
Mary Lee, can you talk about the differences between 3.1 and 4.1? We were just picking up the footprint and putting it onto Whitcomb. Why is it costing more on 3.1?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure. These numbers are based on what the cost estimator gave us, and because it is so high level, they have calculations that they do where they put in the square footage and a few other factors, and then escalation percentages, and then they give us a number. So we do have a more detailed report from them, but it really doesn't shed a huge amount of light on it. I'm not totally sure why that is. It might be because there's quite a bit of site development that's already occurred here, so there's likely to be a lot more utilities that are closer, things like that. But at this time, these two numbers are not really statistically different from each other. It's still so preliminary, and we don't know what sort of field conditions are going to be here. This might be a lot of organic material in the soil that we have to remove and replace. There might be ledge here that increases the cost. So that's why these numbers are not super reliable, and they're more useful in terms of just saying these are very close to each other. They're not substantially different from each other.
Okay. And if I can add to that, Steve, one more thing. The demolition and abatement of the building, of the Shaker Lane building, will not be reimbursable if you're moving to a different site. So that 1.4 million that you see has been added back on into the district share because that becomes ineligible because you have moved away from the current site. So, in other conditions, they are eligible. In this particular position, it's not eligible anymore.
I was more looking at the cost per square foot, 876 to 840. We're building the same building.
Yeah, I think it's the site work cost that Mary Lee explained. That's mainly in the site work cost.
Okay.
Yeah, the Wickham site is fairly clear right now. The only thing that's different is there'd probably be off-site work on the Wickham job we'd have to factor in as well.
Yeah.
Which isn't on here.
Yeah, I mean, the price estimator is working with limited amount of information, as are we, because as we continue to study this and we learn more about the specific conditions at each of these locations, then we can get more and more specific with the price. But for right now, a lot of assumptions are made. They just put in a general allowance for site work, and it's based on things like, is the site already developed? What's the distance from major roadways? Things like that. So it is just an allowance, which is a fancy word for somebody who's taking an educated guess.
And also just compare it. So it's this one is more than this one, or so it's comparing them to one another, because we don't know a lot about the mechanical systems. We don't know a lot about where the utilities need to go or what the septic system needs to withstand. So there's these type of variables that as the project gets more developed will shed light. So that's why it's less about this is the final total. It's more about this one is more than this one or less than this one, or is going to get reimbursed more or less than a different one. So comparing them to one another.
Yeah. So this is still at the 10,000 foot level right now.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at this as more cost per square foot based on the real preliminary, square footages that are being pulled together. So as it says in the upper left-hand corner, these costs are going to change, potentially significantly, as we go through the options. And the recommendation for 3.1, if we start to really, get into that development, you're going to see those numbers change. So this was, as I said, the comparison between apples to apples for all the options that were looked at. And the recommendation stands as 3.1 to go in to development beyond this, then more detail is going to show more costs or more actual costs. Stacy had her hand up before Suresh, I think. Stacy?
Yes. So I was wondering, are there more? So these are all estimates, right? We know they're going to change. They're going to go up or down. They'll likely go up. But are there more variable costs with certain options versus other options? Is there a higher risk for increase in these costs because we're doing a different project versus like if we're doing a renovation versus doing a new project? Like where do we fall into that risk benefit of possible variables in those costs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the risk, for example, for any of these projects, any of these options, you might have the risk of finding a bunch of hazardous materials. Maybe there is a buried oil tank that has leaked and now you have to clean that up. Maybe there is ledge under here that you don't know about and now you have to do blasting. Maybe the soil is not structurally good and then you have to do an extra complicated foundation system. There's any number of things that could occur, and the risks for ad reno versus new are, I wouldn't say one is necessarily more risky than the other. It's just that the risk factors are different, right? So even for a new option, when you're demolishing the old building, you're still going to have to deal with whatever abatement of hazardous materials are found. Just in the case of when you're doing a renovation, now you have to do it while the building is occupied and get it to a safe state so that it can continue to be occupied. Whereas if you're demolishing it, you're just removing the material. So it's really difficult to answer those questions at this time. There's enough variability between them that you can still kind of assume that they're more or less equal at this really early stage, if that makes sense.
But the potential is there.
Yes.
Yeah. Suresh, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, and to add to that, the potential would be as we go more into detailed design, we'll be identifying any of the potentials. Most of the potentials will be part of the contingency that will be identifying and trying to mitigate those, because there will be two independent estimates, one from Studio G, one from Turner Townsend, and they'll be comparing the estimates to come up with a final number that will be presented to the committee and to the MSBA. So that adds one thing. And the other thing was, if I can share my screen for 1 minute, Mary Lee, I just want to show this to Ryan here, if you don't mind. Ryan, this is from yesterday. If you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, this is as of yesterday's meeting at the MSBA.
We just see a list of screenshots.
We're just seeing a list of screenshots. Yeah.
Yeah, this screen. You're not seeing this here?
We're not seeing any pictures, just a list of screenshots.
Uh-oh. Sorry. 1 second. Let me. reduce all these down here. Okay.
So I just want to be sensitive to time. How it's 7:45. How long do people have? I know that we're trying to aim for shorter meetings, but if it's being recorded, is this okay? Or I'm just keeping. I see Michelle's in her car, so what kind of time? This is important information, so just wanted to. I have all night, so but I just wanted to be courteous to everybody else.
No, that's good. We started 20 minutes late too, so we gotta, you know.
Right. So how is everybody doing? Are we in
Good.
this?
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, Suresh.
Okay. Just for your purpose, Ryan, see this number here. This was the MSBS funding limit, 275 a square foot. As late as June 2021 was 360. They increased in December to 432 and in October 23 to 605. And now they're proposing going to 645 as January 1st. This is the largest increase that have ever happened in, like, from 360, they're almost doubling to 645 based upon what's happened after post-COVID. And so you can see pre-COVID and post-COVID, there's a big difference over here. I just wanted to know, this is as of yesterday's FAS meeting.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Stacy, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Yeah, it just clarified that it seems as though there's no more of a potential risk of picking one over the other when we're looking at the district share, that we could essentially be running into the same increase in costs regardless of which option we choose. So yes, it did. Thank you.
And I think
as we go,
go ahead. Sorry.
As we go through feasibility, we're going to be doing more and more investigation of the site. We're going to be doing soil borings, some test pits, basically investigating so that we can try to identify any of these potential unknowns, so that as we learn more and more, then our estimates become more and more accurate and reliable.
Mary Lee, go ahead,
sorry.
Stacey. I was going to add to that list. Yeah.
That was actually a follow-up question I was going to ask. Is there anything that the town can do or dig up to find out what those potential risks are? So I know we're not voting on anything, we're not deciding on anything right now, but it seems as though there's more evaluation time to be done for us to kind of do a little bit of that background work to figure out what our real potential costs could be. This is just a very initial cost estimate.
Yep, and that's what actually we're doing with our consultants and what's going to be happening during PSR. Basically, what the MSBA wants you to do is first identify all potential options, then narrow it down to at least 3, and then by the end of the PSR, you've narrowed it down to 1. And so basically, instead of having to test 6 different options and do borings at all 6 different locations, you maybe do for 3 or maybe just 1 or 2. And so that way, as you eliminate sites for various reasons, maybe you it doesn't deliver the ed program, or you don't like the way that the site is configured for whatever reason, that just saves time and money because you're only really investigating the options that you're really serious about. So that's not anything that the town has to do. That's something that we're doing with our consultants through feasibility.
So we have to submit the 3 choices to MSBA by the end of August. Is that right?
Yes. So
the code upgrade, 1 reno, and 1 new, right?
Okay. So the MSBA step 1, they want you to investigate at least 3 options. 1 is code upgrade. 1 is an ad reno option. 1 is a new construction option. So we did that plus a few other options. Of those, the MSBA wants you to choose at least 3 to move forward into PSR, 1 of which has to be an ad reno option. So most districts almost all districts eliminate the code upgrade option at this time because it just is impossible for it to meet the educational program. So it's just not realistic. So of the remaining 5 options, I have highlighted the top 3 choices based on the scores that everybody had picked. You had a very clearly preferred ad reno option, a very clearly preferred new construction option, and then I took the third choice from those. So we'll be carrying these 3 forward into PSR, and by the end of PSR, we will have narrowed this down to 1 final choice.
And as part of the PDP, we work with the town and the district to get additional information on the sites. So the title of the site, the ownership of the site. So when we start getting information from the assessors or whatever, maybe that information comes out that there was an oil tank somewhere, or at a certain point there was some mitigation or something was done on the site somewhere. That information will come out. So if there's other further investigation that the subs will do, they can focus in on that. Like I know they're looking at subsurface work, potentially Title V work right now. So we're lucky in a way that we're really looking at one site with 3 options, right? So it's ad reno and 2 new on pretty much the same site. You know, Whitcomb's been sort of eliminated or isn't looking that way. So that's going to be easier to focus on as opposed to 6 separate sites all throughout the town to be evaluated, you know, to get information on. It's good that we're on pretty much one site.
I'm still hearing behind the scenes people looking for Whitcomb. So just know that when we meet with the select board, there could be a lot of talk about Whitcomb.
Sure.
If you have specific points that they have been bringing up so that we know sort of what what people are thinking already, then we can better address it. Or maybe they're thinking of something that maybe we haven't considered. That would be really helpful.
I don't think that, so that the people that have said this to me, I don't think they realize how congested it really will be.
Okay.
So I think talking, especially the second road that you're going to put through up toward Town Hall and that back road coming up, that's the parking lot at Shattuck Street is crazy as it is without throwing more traffic through there. So,
right, okay, so, that's good to know. Thank you.
If I can add too, I think potentially I've heard a lot of support for the Whitcomb Ave too. So I think maybe a lot of it might have to do with there's a potential short-term downfall of having it, a lot of congestion during construction, right? Like that's something that we have all decided that, or some of us have decided that may not be the best option. So I think also just noting the long-term limitations that we have to that site in regards to growth. I know it's still a really tight space. And I believe I'm remembering correctly that there wasn't a lot of room for expansion there.
Yes.
So it's not only just the short-term inconveniences, like those are things that, you know, of course anyone can overlook. But it's also the long-term expectations of what that building can provide for the town, which I feel like might be really important for us to just highlight and note, that it's essentially a very similar investment to some of our other options, but at some point we will outgrow it, or it's just not going to be dynamic enough for us. So maybe in the long term, it still isn't the best option for us.
Well, I think remember now we were charged by the SBC as a subgroup to go through this evaluation, and a recommendation was made, right? So you had the other presentation that had the pros and cons. Everybody had discussed it, and there was a decision made, a recommendation brought to the SBC. So sharing this information for all the work that was done with the finance group and the select board and everybody else coming up, I think we really have to focus on why Whitcomb Field was not selected. And it's not just the short-term stuff during construction. I remember the conversation about when sports happen after school and when the high school kids come down and when there's all this stuff going on at those fields, that it gets really, really busy. So it's not just during temporary like construction time, it's other times. And the whatever the educational programming, the other things you mentioned about the expansion, the playground areas, the outdoor areas and stuff, a clear decision was made with not recommending Whitcomb Field. That information has to be shared with that group to understand why that decision was made. Yeah. So I understand what you're saying. This might be the perfect opportunity to educate everybody and say, this is why we did it. And then maybe they'll understand, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. Okay, I understand where you're going. So
yeah, and I agree. I agree with you on that completely. And just to add to that, I think that just like in theory, it's great to think of a school district as kind of like a one-stop shop.
Sure.
Right. But it's important to note that all those schools have very different needs and very different schedules. So though it would be great for us to drop off all the kids at the same time and for them to be doing the activities, the age range and the grades are just, they have very different needs. So it doesn't logistically work that well for the town. It looks like it would, but logistically it doesn't really make as much sense as it does on paper.
So when there's the FinCom select board, the four-headed meeting that's coming up on the 21st, who of the school building committee is going to be the champion to say, hey, we have the subcommittee, we looked at this, and this is the reasoning why. And we can provide any information that would support that. Because coming from the designers and the OPMs, we're doing what we were charged to do. And, we've heard about what, so I think it really needs to be put to bed and all the information put out there. We're happy to support. I do think it needs to come from the school building committee's voice, though, as opposed more so than ours. We're happy to also talk about it. Things that we've talked about, but it needs to really be very clear that, sure, we looked at it. We definitely did our due diligence and we really came to this conclusion and this is why.
So if I could interject, this is Ryan. I think that I think that what you could do is to basically to present both the options that were selected and the options that weren't selected, and why, and make the case as to why the group recommended those three options that are before the group that night. So, and then from that, then other members can step up and speak to it, because I think that Steve and Stacy's points are good ones, and that what we're trying to relate to you is that I think among the group there does seem to be a consensus, but we need to be able to make the effort to educate others who haven't spent the time that we all collectively have put in to educate ourselves. And that's really what this is. It's an effort to walk the four-headed monster, as you said, to explain to them why we came to those conclusions. So that's all really what we're saying. And I think I know Steve will be at that meeting, I will be at that meeting, and we can talk about that. But it's just I think what really the way to think about it is that we need Studio G to sort of to tee it up for us, and then we can Steve and I can try to hit the ball off the tee. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. Just because it's a matter of just educating them, because remember, there are other people that haven't gone through the same education process that we have, and that's and Kelly will be very helpful with that as well when the time comes. Stacy, you'll be there, so that kind of thing is what I would suggest.
I can tell you, for me, I went into this thinking that Whitcomb was the answer, and I came out of it saying, no way. And I think the thing that changed my thought process is when Mary Lee went through and talked about option 3.1 and talked about that design and the benefits of that. And then you look at Whitcomb and those things just aren't there. So that's what kind of got me to it.
So you can say that on the 21st?
If we can, I think if we can also relate that to our main goals, like one of our main goals is to make this space a community space. And with it being so compact and dense in one space, it takes away a lot of that opportunity, because students are going to be using it 100% of the time. There's not going to be a lot of open space for the community to use it because there's not going to be a lot of space even for the students that are going to be using it. So that can be a helpful thing to talk about as well, because, you know, we do need to get votes and support for it. And having it at Wickham doesn't really provide much community benefits. It just provides maybe a district benefit, but not a community benefit.
Yeah, so I'll be doing that presentation, and I will be going through all of the pros and cons, the same as what I presented to you. And then I'll be going through the evaluation criteria. And that was 20 different aspects that were considered for every single one of these options. And so by the end of it, they'll see that we've really seriously considered every single one of these options. And the outcome of that is that Whitcomb came in dead last, even below the code upgrade. So I think that is a really powerful outcome. Stress has his hand up.
Yeah, quick one. As to add to that one, the other thing would be, because it gets too congested in the place, God forbid, the conditions we live in now, the world we live in, you have a lockdown, you're really in a bad position over there. And also having the community space in two different places, it's always advantageous to have that. So, you know, the community space does work great for the two different locations. Yes, having them together, I wish there was more land available. That would be the perfect opportunity, but we're not living with the reality here. You know, and knowing that the space is very limited, it's best to, you know, not try to squeeze everything in, and the numbers speak for themselves, the evaluation score. So,
yeah, I think between the pros and cons and the evaluation, I think there's a lot of information to share with people, and I think they may come to their epiphany like Steve did, going in there in one thought and then seeing, oh, okay, there's the due diligence, the work was done. We've done that exercise. Here's the results of it. Here's the voting of it. And I'm sure there'll be some dialogue, but I think that's the perfect way of going about it. All right. Any other thoughts about costs? Because don't want to be here all night. I know you
just wanted to so Steve Mitchner will be there with Mary Lee, and he's a gentle voice, a soft tone, a reasonable. He could sell anything to anybody. So Steve Mitchner and Mary Lee will be together for that. I'm gonna unfortunately need to miss that one. But
you're not gonna chime in from Japan?
Virtually? The time zone difference
Come on.
might be a little but and Stacy, leave the four-headed monster out of the meeting minutes, please.
It's been recorded.
I know. It's not a monster. It's a gentle giant, if you will.
A little, yeah.
Stacy, you were going to mention something else? Sorry to cut you off.
Nope. That was it.
All right, everybody good with these initial 10,000 foot estimates and the exercise that was done to show where the numbers are based on the square footages, based on the eligible reimbursements to share? Everybody good?
I was just going to give a quick little example to sort of give some context to these numbers.
Sure.
This difference between the highest and the lowest, the 876 versus 840, that's essentially the price of choosing a terrazzo floor over resilient floor. Like, that's the kind of small difference between these options that we're talking. And that's why we truly see these as essentially the same.
Yeah. Yeah, finishes, all that stuff hasn't even come into play yet. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. All right.
All right, moving on.
Next. Yes. All right. So Michelle and her group, along with Kelly, has been going really carefully and really thoroughly through the ED program and looking at literally every single room in the building and what is needed and what is not needed and how these should work together. They have been identifying ways that spaces can have more than one use, in some cases 3 or 4 different uses. So trying to maximize the bang for the buck, essentially, for every single square foot in the building. This spreadsheet here is a high-level version of the huge spreadsheet that we've been looking at that has every single room listed individually. This shows the totals for each general category of space that occurs in the building. And this is what the MSBA is going to be looking at when deciding whether or not to approve, whether or not they will reimburse for certain square footages. We've been going through this with help from Mike Perullo, our ed planner, and he has done this so much. He has a really good sense of what the MSBA is likely to approve, what they are not, what DESE is looking for when they're looking at how we treat the special education spaces, and what the MSBA is looking for in terms of, we're not just asking for space, we are demonstrating that the educators teach in a certain way, or they would like to teach in a certain way if they had the space, and it's really well thought out, even down to the level of having example lessons planned. And so the ed program at this point is over 50 pages, and they've really done a fantastic job of going into detail of thinking this through really carefully and planning to make sure that we're really getting what we need. So with that said, this chart here shows in this first column I don't like that highlighting. This first column shows the square footage of where we are right now in terms of what Michelle and Kelly and their group have decided that they really need to meet the educational program. The second column is what the MSBA includes as their just basic guidelines. It's worth noting that the MSBA puts very little square footage towards the special education category. That is because every single district does special ed differently, and they provide support differently, and they have really customized needs and spaces. And so what the MSBA says is, all right, we'll just say you need these two basic spaces, and then you tell us what you need and how you're going to use it. And so it requires districts to really lay out very carefully how many classrooms they need, how many small group rooms they need, how many offices and collaboration spaces for the specialists and interventionists that they need. And if the district is able to really describe the program and what they need, then the MSBA just approves it. It's very, very rare that they turn down space for special ed. So this final column here is the most important one. And what this shows is that the majority of spaces that are added are in the special ed category. That means that the MSBA is essentially guaranteed to say, yes, you need the space, we will approve it as reimbursable. The second highest category is in core academics. And this final column, I sort of summarize what is making up that square footage. So I'll take this section by section. Core academics, this is just the regular classroom for grades kindergarten through 2. The MSBA spreadsheet does you put in the enrollment number and then it populates the number of classrooms that you need, and it's just purely a calculation. And so what happens very frequently is that they'll give you, in this case, they gave us 13 classrooms for grades 1 and 2, which means that you have an uneven number of classrooms between the 2 grade levels. So usually what we do is we just request one additional classroom so that you have the same number for both grade levels. The next piece of that is something that they're calling the academic suite. And this is the math and reading support specialist. They provide services for all students at any time to help them just get through whatever they're struggling with in math and reading. That's a few specialists plus some small group space and meeting space. Next is the Imaginatorium space. The MSBA for grade 3 and above. And if you're under grade 3, then they assume that that is done in just a regular classroom. However, Shaker Lane has the Imaginatorium. It's a very well-established program. It is a program that they've had for a long time, and they really use it, and they try to embed it throughout the other activities that the students are doing. And so what we're doing here is, instead of one classroom that's the Imaginatoriums that the students go to. We are breaking that space up so that each grade level neighborhood has some square footage from that classroom. And then there's an additional fifth space where we're storing pieces of equipment that the students can look at, because it's really cool to see things like 3D printing and laser cutting and the wind tunnel, but it's not necessarily things that the students are going to be touching themselves. So the name we gave that is a creation station. This ends up being 850 square feet, which is exactly the same size as the Imaginatorium you have right now. So the MSBA is likely to approve that because you already have this program. We're not asking for more square footage over what you are using right now. Then the final category is these extended learning dens. That is what maybe you've heard it called a project area or a learning commons. Schools call these a lot of different things, but basically this is the space where you're spilling out of the classroom, you're sharing resources among teachers, you're sharing things like science equipment or art equipment or sinks or library books, things like that that make more sense as a shared resource for each grade level. All right, then these additions here are very small. This is basically just making sure that the staff are going to be able to have their lunch in a reasonable amount of time and a reasonable distance from the cafeteria, and they're able to sort of have that socializing that anybody wants with their colleagues and their coworkers, just making sure that it's the right size for the number of people who are going to be using it. Medical, this is the nurse's office. We're asking for another toilet room that's large enough to accommodate a changing table. This is really important for this young age group of kids. And then also an isolation room, which is basically just an enclosed exam room with a cot, so that if a child is really sick with stomach bug or COVID or some other really contagious issue, they have a room where they're not coughing and sneezing all over everybody else in the room, and they just wait there until their parents come and get them. So it's a very small ask overall. In admin and guidance, we're just asking for the MSBA gives you a small workroom to be shared among everyone. And we find that it's better to do 2 of these, one on each floor, so that teachers are more likely to use it. It's close at hand. It can be used for collaboration among all the students, all the teachers. And it's a little bit bigger because, especially for this age group, you have a lot of spreading out materials and collating papers to create, packets, or you're creating decorations for your bulletin boards, or you need really space to spread out and work. So these all are small asks. We don't foresee any issues with the MSBA approving those. And then the final category is the pre-K and a couple other very small spaces. So pre-K classrooms, we are asking for 1,200 square foot each, which is in alignment with what the MSBA will reimburse for a pre-K classroom. Then we're asking for an 80 square foot mother's room, which is a lactation room. Right now, they're working with a 28 square foot closet, essentially. And then the other thing we are adding is just a small kitchenette area in the administration. So just enough for a refrigerator, a sink, coffee machine, and microwave. So very small ask for those 2. Altogether, we're asking for just under 20,000 square feet over what the MSBA lists as their guidelines. And then when you apply a grossing factor of 1.5, which accommodates for all the circulation space, all the mechanical space to support this, the thickness of the wall, things like that, it's 29,000 over the MSBA guidelines. We spoke to Mike Perolo about this number just to see where that falls in his experience. Is this reasonable? Is it unreasonable? And he was surprised at actually how low it was. Several projects that he's working on right now have quite a bit higher numbers for this. So I know that looking at this number, you think, oh my goodness, that sounds like a really high number. But generally for schools who are going through this process, it's on the low average side of things. Just a good check to make sure that we're not going off the rails here, that we're not, doing crazy wish list, pie in the sky ideas. These are really well thought out spaces that Michelle and Kelly and their group have identified as what they will need and use in the new school. Any comments or questions on this?
I do have a question. This is all like really, really good information, and I feel like you did a really good job organizing it in a way that we can all kind of understand it. One thing that I had that just kind of popped up in my mind was in our earlier discussions, the MSBA is giving reimbursement for our current needs, right? And then they gave us a little bit of additional space, knowing that the town is growing, but not much. Are these square foot estimates including that potential growth? And how does that affect the costs that we just looked at?
Yes, this is based on the enrollment of 435, which is what was included or approved by the MSBA when you went through the whole statement of interest, getting into the MSBA pipeline process. That's 435 in grades K through 2. And then the number of preschoolers, we are estimating that at approximately, I want to say, 40-ish or so students. We are looking at maximum of 15 or so in each of the pre-K classrooms. More likely, it's going to be closer to around 12 or so. But there is potential for growth in the pre-K. The rest of the number of the 435, that was set a long time ago by the MSBA.
Okay. So are these square footage numbers included in the reimbursement rates that we have? Because it was my understanding, and I'm sorry for not being clear with it, was my understanding that any additional space that we wanted to have once that analysis is done for the potential growth for the town, the MSBA, that's just not what they reimburse for. But right now we are currently building for a building that will fit our current needs plus a little bit of wiggle room. But anything beyond that will add to those costs that we just discussed. If it turns out that.
So there's sort of two different things here. There's the enrollment of 435. I'll just ignore pre-K for now, but the 435, and that, for what it sounds like, that's the number that already has the little bit of wiggle room above what you have enrolled right now. Is that correct?
I don't have the number. No, I don't. I'm sorry. I wish I did, but I don't have those numbers. I don't have our enrollment numbers in front of me. Okay.
Hi, Mary.
Okay. So, yeah,
that's correct. So we're about 450 and 30 to 40 of those are preschool kids. So yes.
Okay. So when we add square footage here, this is not square footage for more students beyond the 435. This is square footage to meet the needs of those 435 students. Okay. So when the MSBA looks at this, they first look at the ed program and say, is the space well defended and well thought out? And does the district truly need this? Or are they just popping in extra square feet? With the ed program, as I've seen so far, they've spent a ton of time on this, and it's extremely well documented and very much demonstrated that these spaces will be used and are needed for the delivery of education at Shaker Lane. So the MSBA will say that this number is reimbursable, which means that the square footage is subject to the 48% of the 605 per square foot rate. So the number that the MSBA gives to the town will go up proportionately, but also the town share will also go up proportionally. And that's why the dollar per square foot was most important to look at, because when we're looking at pricing, the square footage is not yet set, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, that definitely,
yes, okay.
That definitely makes sense. And if I can loop back to like our current conversation about the Wickham Ave property. So we know that MSBA is they're going to cover a certain percentage of kind of like our current students with a tiny bit of wiggle room. And in our conversation with trying to talk about Wickham Ave, I think it's really important to note that those additional costs that we are going to have from the town are going to be 100% either way, whether it's from Whitcomb or whether it's from another site. But in Whitcomb, it is nearly impossible, or will be very expensive for us to add that space if the time comes that there's some type of evaluation that all of this new development is going to increase our student population.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because the MSBA, when we submit fees, I think when we've got it down to one option, the MSBA asks us to demonstrate that we could do a classroom addition of, I think, 4 classrooms. And that is to accommodate growth in the district beyond what the MSBA enrollment number is. And so if you can't find room on the site to add 4 more classrooms, then that means you have to build up. And that's when it starts getting really expensive or not feasible to expand if you do get beyond the 435. So yes, that's a great point.
Great, thank you.
Michelle, did you have your hand up?
I did. I was just going to chime in. I wonder if Stacy was reflecting on our statement of interest, because we do have an additional classroom, Stacy, for every grade level, K1 and 2. So I just thought I would add that in, because that was in our SOI.
Right. So that's in our statement of interest, but is that reimbursed? That's not reimbursable by MSBA, or it is included?
Oh, I see. So right now in the school, you have 6 classrooms per grade level. And the MSBA space summary template, when you put in the 435 number, they give you 13 classrooms for grades 1 and 2, which is 6.5 classrooms. And then we're asking for this additional classrooms rounded up to 7 classrooms per grade level. So that extra classroom is already planned for the 435 students. That's not going to be an add for the district.
Okay.
So Mary Lee, if we can relate these numbers to what we saw in the costs. So the cost that you showed on the previous page was based on the 73,850, right?
Uh-huh.
And if we're adding 29,000 square feet at $876 a square foot, we're talking an extra $25 million to this project. Am I correct?
This is where we move past comparing apples to apples, and we start to think about how can we together reduce the dollar per square foot. Like, what choices can we make when we're designing the structural system or the mechanical system or other major pieces of the building to reduce the square footage. So just for comparison, approximately for the Florence Road School that we just toured, it was a $655 per square foot when it came down to it. And that project was done through COVID and all the escalation that happened there. So this $876 per square foot is very much on the high side for what we think we can accomplish. So yes and no, basically. If you're looking purely at these numbers, then yes, it would be taking this number of square footage, adding the additional square footage and doing that math. But in reality, we're going to work really hard to reduce this number as much as possible.
Just to get some reality into it, though. So even if we were able to reduce that to the 650, 29,000 square feet is still another 18 to 19 million dollars. So we're talking close to $100 million school. Is that 77 and 20, 97?
Yeah, I wish I had more accurate numbers from Florence Road Care. But Mark or Suresh, if there's anything you want to add about this.
I think if we know what the square footage the MSBA will allow, and once we make that determination, that's when we start scaling back to see. Right now, we have to go on the basis of that they will allow you no extra square footage. And so comparing, like on the next slide, which merely shows on the, the 73,845 square foot. That's what is per guidelines right now.
Mhm.
Will they allow more? How much will they allow? Hopefully, all the 929,000. They might allow 25,000. So where do we take the number? Do we? I mean, we can change the number on the bottom line to 100. The new number, 103,000 square foot. That's going to change drastically on the total dollar values, and I can do that. Actually, that shouldn't take too long. So
if I can just jump in while Suresh does quick math.
no.
Oh, go ahead.
I was
Quicker
going
math than I
to
thought.
go because I have the Excel spreadsheet. So let me just share my screen for a second.
Sure.
Can you see my screen?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
So these numbers now change. When I change this to 103,000 square feet, just in this new construction, I didn't do the renovation ad, but just, but if you do the same thing over here, add 29,000 square foot, that'll be 100,000 there, and 100,000 on 101,000 over here. Okay. So the district share keeps going, based on DVV keeps going up.
Yep.
So that's what you're gonna see as you move it from one to the other one. But we don't know about that till we really get to the point where do we stand with the MSPA with the whole project.
Right. And that's why it's a comparative. It's not, these numbers are not we're not holding tight to these numbers. It's more comparing one to another. When we did that cost estimate, that was 2-3 weeks ago when the ed program was still being massaged as far as needs. So we just had to do it at some point to start the process to understand the numbers. So we're chasing a little bit here, understandably, but that's why it's a comparative cost analysis opposed to like, here's your cost estimate. So that's the delta and the difference.
Right. And as Marilee said, the estimator made an assumption for structurals, HVAC, and those might be way on the high end, and so when the reality comes in and you start looking at efficiencies in those items, those numbers will still come down. And it was, I think, Marilee, you brought it to my attention, Steve, the original RFS that went out for the project had a range of $15 to $75 million construction cost. So 20 to 25% on top of that for total cost. So now that's around 90, 95 million, as the overall total project cost. So initially these numbers right now seem to be in that ballpark, but there's a long way to go as far as estimated. But this was just a total cost comparison overall based on square footage. So
and the cost square foot would not go exactly the same because it'll fall down a little bit. Think about you're putting a 2-story addition to the building, not a single story. So you only have half the roof. So you're not putting 30,000 square foot of roof. You're only putting 15,000 more square foot of roof. So that all those factors will come into place as to what gets approved and where do we stand with a number.
Okay, 8:30. Everybody good with the space summary? Any other questions at all for space summary? Because we got some cool plans to look at.
I'll add a comment that the ED program, where all of the square footage is based on, the MSBA has us do a couple different versions of that. So these numbers are still just based on a first go round of this. And the longer that Kelly and Michelle and their team spend thinking about this and figuring this out, then the spaces are going to get more refined and more precise. And it's possible that we find other ways to share spaces and that number might go down. It might go up slightly, but there are opportunities for us to keep revisiting it and find ways to make sure that we're not adding unnecessary square footage.
And we're not committed to the square footage, I'd say, until town vote for the, so we still have, consider this a draft in the sense we'll review with the MSBA. There's a chance to go back. This is not set in stone, all of the above. So it's still, again, this is feasibility. So it's what's feasible is really the gist of it. So we're seeing what we can do. So.
All right, the next couple of slides basically, we've been trying to develop diagrammatic floor plans. So I'll show it to you in a second. Basically, we are showing most of the spaces and just general organization about how things work. It does not include every single little toilet room, every single little small group room, but it shows the general organization of the building and the adjacencies of which spaces want to be close by, which spaces want to be in the middle, in the more community area, and how we want to do outdoor learnings and other connections throughout the building. So we are showing walls here, but this is very, very preliminary. This is mostly just to sort of diagram out how the spaces work in the building. So at this point, we're looking for the new construction option at a 2-story option where we have pre-K and kindergarten on the first floor, and above them we have grade 2 and grade 1. We have the media center and the cafeteria here in the core of the building, as well as access to the gym. So after hours, this would be the community core that could be opened up for others to use. And then the learning areas could be shut down and completely closed off, so there's no access to that after hours. We have started to look at how circulation generally works, where the main entrance is, who is next to the main entry to control access and make sure that only people who belong in the building are coming in. And we're starting to think about what happens when there is an event, like the second graders do a performance, or maybe there's a preschool graduation. How deep into the school are we allowing visitors to go for those activities? We're also thinking about how we are dispersing the special ed and support spaces throughout the building, rather than clumping them all together. Jesse likes to see them scattered throughout so that students who are receiving support don't have to travel and go to a special ed area where there might be a stigma associated with that. Rather, they're allowed to stay in their learning den with their peers and still receive the support that they need. So there's a lot of thinking that goes into this. It's continually massaged and massaged and massaged. And as we get closer and closer to the final rooms and areas, then this is going to get more and more detailed. But generally, this is the direction things are moving for the new option. This right here is going to fit on the upper field option, so the 3.1 preferred new construction option. And then the third option that we talked about moving forward into PSR is going to be option 3.2, new construction on that lower field. This building with more massaging would also fit on that site as well. So this is more just like nothing to vote on here, just being transparent and open about the process of how this building goes from a list of rooms to an actual real building. Next is the add reno option. So this is showing the existing school here with the existing academic wing having been demolished, with some of these spaces being shifted around, such as right now the media center is right here. We're proposing to move it into the existing gymnasium space, making a couple of moves to expand the kitchen and the back of house, expand the admin into the newly vacated library area, and finding ways to reconfigure the space to meet the needs as outlined in the ED program and the space summary template. And then doing an addition of the academic wing, the classes, the learning dens for each of the 4 grade levels, and then also a new gym here. And so same thing here, this is very diagrammatic. This is just laying out the space to see generally what shape the building is starting to take and how things fit together and relate to each other. Any questions or comments on the floor plans, either ad reno or new construction? All right. This was all we wanted to share today.
All right.
So I think we lost. It looks like Mike had to step off, but Michelle was there today. Anybody that was at the tour today have any comments that they want to bring up about the Florence Roach building? Thought it was great. It looks really, really wonderful. Nice design, and thought the spaces flowed beautifully, and finishes, the lighting, everything was wonderful. But it was good to see almost a concrete example of what you all are going to be trying to achieve as well. It's nice to have a neighbor with that example right there. So
for sure, kudos Mary Lee and Meryl. It was beautiful. They definitely had a different vision than us, and she's like, "Oh, your vision." Oh, geez. Well, I'm home. Hopefully, can you hear me now?
You're breaking up a little bit. Yeah.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, now I'm not on my cellular Wi-Fi. Now I'm actually in the house. I just want to say I appreciate Mary Lee so much, because she is truly looking at our vision and listening to our staff and everything in the ed plan that is close to 60 pages now. It's like giving birth again to another child. But I just appreciate your openness, Mary Lee. You're so wonderful. It's
thank you.
It's going to be exciting to see this all come to be one day.
Yeah, we are also very, very excited, and it's so wonderful to work with a district that is so dedicated and is putting in so much effort into planning this and cares so much about the kids and what they need. And here's a little guy here going into kindergarten.
I love it.
I really love this school project, and I'm really excited. The team is amazing. All of your staff are fantastic, and it's so far it's been amazing, and I can't wait to see where we go.
Well, you see the reality of everything that we're talking about tonight. You know what the ed plan is, what your vision is. Now, how does it come to fruition, right? Mm-hmm. Now the reality comes in of planning, cost, where it's going to be located, et cetera. So having that baseline to build off of is exactly the direction we're going. So you're probably never going to do this again in our lifetime. So go for that golden ring. Make it work. Get what you need for the students and for your plan and for the community. There will be pushback. There'll be, wins and losses, but this is the opportunity right now. You saw those initial diagrammatic floor plans. That's coming together based on what the numbers are generally are coming together, where the sites maybe are coming together, still at a preliminary level, but all that good thinking and all that good work is now starting to show. That recipe is starting to bake a little bit. So that's wonderful. So everybody's input has been really incredible. It's still a long way to go. There's a lot of hurdles and things. Costs are always a big thing. We know what's coming. We have work that needs to be done for the end of the month. August is going to be a busy month. We are looking to submit the PDP on the 30th. We're getting the approval on the meeting on the 28th, which was moved from the 21st, which I didn't update on the schedule, which I have to do. So now the 21st is the joint meeting to share all this information with everybody, so they all hopefully are at the same level of knowledge, so we don't have much pushback going forward, because the time frame is, tight, but it's doable. So, kudos for everybody for doing this stuff. Sorry it went so late because we had a little late start. Is there any other comments, questions, concerns, quandaries that people have? Meryl.
So Studio G will be sending to Mark and Suresh tomorrow by noon. We're going to be sending a draft of the PDP. It's not perfect. It's missing things. But this is a chance, because you're going to have the SBC, the whole SBC, not just this subcommittee, but the SBC is going to need to vote to say, yes, we reviewed it and we agree that this is good to go to the MSBA. So this is a preview for you. You'll have another chance, but this is the draft that we would love your input on. We're going to ask for, and we'll have these instructions by email, but I realize this is a smaller subgroup, but we're going to be looking for feedback and input by, I believe, the 14th of August. So just emails, not to each other, but to, I guess, Mark and Suresh, and also to Mary Lee, myself, and probably Taylor, who a few of you met today. So we're going to be considering all questions and input that we can contribute to this PDP.
So that's the link, Meryl, to the box. Is that where it's going to be, in the shared box?
Likely we'll put it in the shared box. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be it's going to be pretty big. So
yeah. So we'll do it electronically that way.
So there's a lot of paperwork. We don't have all the paperwork put in yet. We have placeholders for. We have confirmation letters. We have title searches, things that we talked about before that are in progress, but we don't have them all fully done yet. But so a lot of information is going to be there. So as Meryl said, please, if you have an opportunity to take a look at it, any of your comments, they'll let you know exactly how to respond to us. But we do not want to miss that date on the 30th. We want to make sure that we get that in, because they take their time to review it, and then we have our time to respond to their review. And that's, you've seen it in the schedule before. We'll update that on the 28th as well.
Yeah, we want to give everybody as much of a chance as possible to review the PDP. But some people choose not to look at it, or they just look at a few key sections that they really care about, because it is a long document. But we want people going into that meeting on the 28th with feeling confident that they can make an educated vote on that.
Stacy?
Yes, no, I just wanted to ask, because I know we have a lot of deadlines coming up and a lot of important decisions to make. I had just looked at my calendar, and I know we have a lot of meetings coming up, but I don't have any invites in my calendar. So I just didn't know if those invites have been sent out, or if they're still just kind of up in the air.
They have not. No, we had a little bit of a miscommunication snafu with the meeting yesterday not being posted. We've clarified that now. Kelly has directed me to work with Dorothy to post all the meetings, and with Steve Moore, because the subcommittee is kind of different than this SBC. The subcommittee was charged to do something on their own. Well, I'll make sure with Dorothy that's going to work, and then I'll continue with Steve Moore. So really the two dates that we're looking at is the 21st and the 28th, right? I mean, the 21st is the shared meeting. The 28th is the next SBC meeting. So those are the only two. And I'm hoping it won't probably happen by tomorrow, but definitely early next week, we'll get all that information posted. The only issue is we have an agenda that we have to put together for the meeting, so we don't want to put it out too early. We like to do it like a week before at least, so they can look at the agenda to make sure that these are the things you're going to talk about. And we need to talk with Ryan and a few other people about the agenda for the shared meeting to make sure we are efficient in what we're going to bring up and talk about. And I don't know what kind of time frame we have. Do we have 30 minutes? Do we have 20 minutes? We have to work all that out, but we're going to shoot for a week before to get that information out to everybody, make sure they get it on their calendar. So hopefully no more communication snafus as we continue on. But those are the two dates that anybody else correct me. Those are the only two dates I see coming up, that the 21st and the 28th that we're meeting. We're not meeting again on the 17th, right? That was a discussion, but I don't think that's happening, right? Yeah.
Right.
So those are the two dates, Stacy, and we'll get those out to you sooner than later.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And are those going to be virtual or in person?
Right now, the SBC on the 28th will remain virtual. Right now, there's a discussion of a hybrid meeting on the 21st.
Okay.
Seeing that, I think the select board, they're talking about having it at the library. See, there's still a lot of TBDs.
There's a lot of, okay.
If it's in the larger space in the library, then maybe it would be great to have people there in person. And then those that can go in virtually, like Meryl will from Japan. So, it's, so that's being determined. Once that's determined, that'll come out with all the information for the meeting.
The 28th is already,
thank you.
The 28th, I'm sorry, the 21st is already posted on the town website.
There it is. Does it say where we're having
it's not, but we don't have the invitation invites though, right? Like none of the invites have been sent out yet, but they will be, I guess, is what I just want to make sure that those will be sent out.
Yeah, we're going to make sure going forward that either with the subcommittee, with the people, still posted publicly, but they get the invitations, and in the SBC meetings, they get the invitations. It's not the mad scramble at the end to go in and find the meeting number, and because you don't have a link,
Right,
just want to make sure everybody gets a link. Everybody's life's busy. It's much easier to open up, turn your link on, than I got to go find the number and all that. So we're gonna clean all that up.
Awesome, thank you. No, and I appreciate your work. You guys have been doing a phenomenal job. So I really appreciate that. I don't want to miss anything else. So thank you very much.
We're excited. You're very welcome. It's a cool project, and I think the opportunities are endless. So.
And we're not stopping August 30th. September is going to be busy too. So we got more to do.
It only gets busier, believe it or not. But that's that's, you know, where we're building on everything else. That's a good foundation. Any other questions or concerns from anybody? I know we're not voting, so we don't need to say, you know, let's get an agenda to get out of here, but it's 8:45. Thanks everybody much for taking their evening. Have a great trip, ladies, when people head out, if we don't talk to you again. And any questions, please reach out to us. We'll be pulling the information together and the comments that you might have for the PDP, and we'll tighten it all up. Hey, the football player, what's he doing in there?
I don't think he realized it was
10-21,
No.
10-21.
Love it.
All right. If
right.
nothing else from anybody, thanks so much. Have a great night, and we'll
Thanks,
talk soon.
everyone. Have a good
Thank
day.
you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a safe trip.
Oh,
Yep, have a
Thank
great
you.
trip.
take care.